I was trying to go for like a warrior look, but I'm not really sure if that's what's actually being presented here, but at least you have a basic idea of why I look like this in the thumbnail. So, what's rather odd with comparing The Return of the King to its movie counterpart is that it actually begins with a lot of events that are in the Two Towers. So, as I mentioned in the last episode, the movie The Two Towers hints at this idea of Shelob, a giant spider that Golem has used to try to get the ring away from Frodo. In the second book, we actually get the spider, as well as Sam and Frodo taking on this horrific Shelob. That happens in the movie this time around. And also in The Two Towers, we have Orthanc being destroyed, and as well as Merry and Pippin greeting all of the royalty to the city, and kind of poke fun at what's left of Saruman at this point. That is what happens here in The Return of the King. Now, what's rather different here, I remember seeing this deleted scene in a bit of a fun video. So, in The Return of the King, even though this event takes place in the Two Towers, wow, this is going to be confusing. Instead of Gandalf taking away Saruman's power, Saruman, at that moment, is immediately betrayed by what's left of Wormtongue, and he is stabbed. Now, the main reason I know about this scene is because there's a bit of a joke going on. So, Sir Christopher Lee, as well as Ian Fleming, yes, the Ian Fleming that wrote the Bond novels, were both in naval intelligence. And because of this work, Christopher Lee has done some rather interesting things, shall we say. When Peter Jackson is directing him as to how he should sound when he's being stabbed in the back, Christopher Lee corrects him and says, no, you don't scream when you're being stabbed in the back. It's more like a rather than anything else. So it's just kind of funny to think, what was he doing in the Secret Service? But this part about Wormtongue betraying him is actually a little different for how it works out in the book. I will get to that eventually. But before we do, so the other big thing is after Saruman's power has been taken away by Gandalf, Wormtongue takes this rather odd stone known as the Planetire. I believe that's how it's supposed to be pronounced. I'm not sure how the accents work. But anyway, the stone is thrown down, to which Pippin finds it and wonders what it is. He picks it up and is almost drawn to it when Gandalf says, "Hey you, none of that. Give it to me. You need it right now." And it pretty much plays the same way it does in the movie The Return of the King. But what I find rather odd, so in this section in the Two Towers, most of the water used to flood Isengard has been taken away. But yet here in the movie, it's about maybe 3 or 4 inches deep, so the orb is completely submerged when Pippin finds it. Just like in the book, Pippin is very tempted by this orb and just has to see what it's like. But what's different is, while in the book, the forces were going back to Minas Tirith after the great victory at Helm's Deep, here in the book, they're already at Minas Tirith when it happens, so they have like this canopy overhead and everything is fine. And what is also interesting is that when Pippin is practically possessed by this orb, the orb is immediately covered. However, Aragorn takes possession of it because he's like one of only 3 people that can wield it without going mad. This is sort of touched upon in the movie, as Aragorn is the one that's able to rip the Planetire from Pippin's hands, but at the same time, you start to see him starting to be eaten away by it as well, and, well, it doesn't really sound all kingly, does it? So in both, seeing that Pippin is kind of a nuisance Gandalf decides to send him to the stronghold of Gondor. Before the party separates, Aragorn goes with a whole bunch of other rangers, as well as Legolas and Gimli, to an area known as the Path of the Dead. This is something that nobody wants to talk about, including Theoden's daughter of Minas Tirith, who tries her best to dissuade Aragorn not to go there. I think I'm getting it mixed up. It happened in The Return of the King. Wow, this is going to be really confusing. However, Aragorn doesn't lament, and everybody just plows right on through. Now, this right here is another major difference. So, when they go through the Path of the Dead, Aragorn says that he is the only one that can go through it alive. The main reason it's called the Path of the Dead is because it's haunted by an old kingdom. Isildur, which is Aragorn's, I want to say, like, great-great-grandfather or something like that. I mean, there are family trees in here, but I don't have that much time. But anyway, they made a promise to him that they would defeat Sauron. However, when the time came, this kingdom aided Sauron instead. So Isildur put a curse on them, saying that they will never rest until they have fulfilled their promise. And so when Aragorn goes there in the book, he goes there and says, "Oathbreakers, hear me now. If you follow me, then you can finally rest at peace." To which there is this whisper off in the distance saying, "We will join you." Which that's about all you can hear when it comes to the spirits. This is very different in the movie. It seems like Aragorn just has no idea what he's getting into. And even when they get there, Aragorn has to convince the spirits to join him, because the idea of having Isildur's sword, which in the movie was not reforged. In the book, this sword was already reforged after that meeting with Elrond, and that was just in the Fellowship, so I was really confused by that. But after a fair bit of convincing, the King of the Dead decides to join them. With the forces of the dead at Aragorn's beckon, there is a city not too far away from Gondor. In fact, it's across this large expanse of water. He is able to take over the majority of Sauron's forces. While this is happening, Pippin and Gandalf are riding off to Gondor itself. Now, in the movie, the Planeteer gives Pippin a little bit of foresight almost, basically saying that Gondor will fall after Sauron sets fire to it. That's not so much how it is in the book here. It's more Gandalf going to Gondor to warn the king, well, in this case the regent, Denenther, that Sauron's forces are going to descend onto Gondor. Now this Denenther is actually Boromir's father. Gandalf has been prepped by this in the book that Denenther knows. And that Denenther, he's a very sneaky character and warns Pippin that he might ask him a whole bunch of questions pertaining to Boromir, to which you are not supposed to bring up the ring or the idea that he was possessed by wanting to own it, and that is what killed him. In the movie, it's very different. In this one, Gandalf doesn't know that Denenther knows that Boromir has already died. In fact, he is holding on to the shattered horn that Boromir blew right before all the orc arrows hit him. That part is similar to the book, but at that point Denenther is still grieving and wants an explanation right now. In the book, when he comes through, Denenther's just kind of sitting there very stoically, wondering what to do. Through a bit of trickery, Denenther is able to have Pippin as a manservant. Gandalf's a little leery of this, but he figures that it was honestly the best course of action to try to keep on the steward's good side. In the movie, Pippin just pledges his service in order to apologize for Denenther's death. Feels kind of guilty as he died trying to save both him and Merry. Now, in the book, we go into a lot more detail about Pippin's duties. He is basically just sitting on the wall, keeping lookout, and makes pretty good friends with one of the gatekeepers known as Belrod. Now, one of the bigger problems with being a guard in Gondor is that unlike hobbits having 5 meals a day, they only have about 2.5, maybe 3 if you're assigned to heavy duty. Because of all the forces of Sauron pounding upon Gondor, resources have to be rationed. Also, the city has mostly been cleared out of women and children. Some of the children have stayed behind, but it's all full of men trying to guard the place, while the women are off in a safer place. Once again, this is a major difference in the movie, as we see Gondor has women, children, and warriors in it. In the book, all of a sudden, everything just kind of grows dark. Right before an intense thunderstorm, right before it rains, the idea that there is an intense darkness as well as just this evil slowly rising up. After a few days of this, Gondor knows that they are outnumbered, and they send this message to Minas Tirith. So in the movie, it is a beacon, basically like a whole bunch of fires going off in unison begging for help. In the book, it is a black arrow with a painted red tip, basically saying, "We need your help immediately." Minas Tirith gets this message, and the king, still not really fearing death so much, takes all the troops that he can muster and heads to Gondor as fast as possible. Now we have a bit of a hangover from the Two Towers, where King Theoden just doesn't want to fight unless it's absolutely necessary. However, when the beacon goes up, we start to see a bit more of the Theoden in the book. The one that is just realized his life has been wasted, and that dying on the battlefield is going to be much better than just sitting there in the throne room doing nothing. Along the way, Merry then goes to the service of Theoden. Kind of a bit of a juxtaposition, if you know what that means. The idea that Theoden is a bit more of a friendly, kind-hearted king, while Denenther is a bit more of a snake, almost, is the best way to describe him. The idea that he kind of tricked Pippin into the service and is now basically saying, "You belong to me now. You have to do everything I say." As opposed to Theoden, that's just kind of like, you can pretty much just treat me as your pop if you want. Just try your best, that's all I'm asking for. As they're journeying along, they bump into this other group of people of the woods. For the most part, they just want to be left alone. But they form just a quick partnership. They're basically spies, trying to see what in the world is going to happen to Gondor, to which they all see this giant army of orcs is about to assail the city, to which from there, Theoden makes his way to Gondor as fast as possible. But also taking a few breaks here and there because once they get there, they still have to be able to fight. This is kind of present in the movie, but the major difference is instead of running into these wood people, they run into the path of the dead, to which Elrod comes in to convince Aragorn to go there, which I just find that interesting because Elrod doesn't really show up here in the book until like the very end. We go back to Pippin on Gondor. All of a sudden, there's a group of horsemen being pursued by one of the Nazgul. Gandalf immediately runs out to defend them, and through his white radiance is able to deflect the creature, to which the party is able to come in, one of them being Faramir, Denenther's other son. Instead of welcoming Faramir with open arms, Denenther is disappointed that he had to surrender his post and that Boromir would have been so much better for the task. And even Faramir says, "I think it would have been better if I would have died instead of Boromir," to which Denenther is just kind of like, Yeah, you're probably right. Both of them are very emotional, but yet I came closer to crying when I saw this in the movie than when I was reading it. Aside from the whole darkness all over the land, this part pretty much plays out exactly as it does in the movie. But Faramir is sent out again to try to do another battle, but by the time he comes back, he has been shot down by this poison arrow of orcs. He is just barely alive, but at this, Denenther has basically given up all hope as well as all sanity, and tries to do some weird wizardry up in his private tower where they kind of see lights going on and off, as well as other odd odors kind of lingering throughout the air. But there isn't too much time to worry about this, as this is where Gondor is being assaulted, and the troops of Minas Tirith are nowhere in sight. At this, Gandalf sends Pippin to try to figure out what the king's orders are, to which the king says, "Who cares? You can go die with the rest. I release you from my service." To which Pippin is very distraught by this and tells Gandalf, to which Gandalf is the one that rouses the troops up to be able to fight against this onslaught of orcs. Now, there's two things here I was very surprised to see them actually carry over into the movie. So, as a means of intimidation, the previous battle that Faramir was part of, all the captors were beheaded, and all the heads were put into a trebuchet, or catapult if you prefer, and all thrown onto the city. And wow, I didn't think they would actually do it, but they did it. And then the other big thing is this odd battering ram. Even as I was reading it, I'm just like, what on earth is that supposed to be? It is carried by trolls, and it's in the form of a giant iron wolf, which is used to take down the gates of Gondor. The battle is epic on both scales, and if you thought the Battle of Helm's Deep was epic, this is Helm's Deep times at least 3, maybe even 4. During all this battle, Pippin realizes that Denenther plans to not only burn the living Faramir on a funeral pyre, but to also burn himself. His new friend Balrog agrees to be able to hold out the funeral pyre for as long as possible, while Pippin tries to find Gandalf to maybe talk reason with him. Once again, this is very, very different in the movie. So yes, the plan for Denenther to burn Faramir as well as himself is the same. However, the character of Balrog isn't around, and it's instead Pippin that is the one that's trying to delay this funeral pyre, while Gandalf is trying to run to the place as fast as he can. But this idea that Denenther has a magic power that he's trying to use to save Faramir, none of that is mentioned. When Denenther releases Pippin from his service, it is right there upon the funeral pyre. He basically picks him up by the collar and says, "Your service is no longer required. You could go die with all the others." So in both, the pyre is stopped and Faramir is saved. However, the big difference is the demise of Denenther. So Denenther also had one of those planetira. However, in it, all you could just see is the downfall of Gondor. This drove him insane. So what he did is he took the orb and he jumped right onto the funeral pyre, just hoping to finally be free from this nightmare. And legend persists that if anyone were to look into the planetira to this day, the first thing they would see, unless they were a really strong soul, is just a pair of wrinkled old hands holding it. Now, what's different here is in the movie, Denenther realizes that Faramir is still alive and is very thankful for this. However, he doused himself in oil already and caught fire on the pyre that was meant for Faramir. So Denenther then just kind of runs out of the hall burning and screaming like a maniac. This is supposed to be a rather deep character. I feel like they didn't handle it too well in the movie. But there is one thing I was really excited for in this movie that was not in the book. So there's this one warg captain, which I don't know what it is. It just seems like he's a villain that's just absolutely having a ball with this. And he's also got like the deep voice that I would have associated with the orcs.
Send the prisoners to the other side of Gondor.
And I just love that. Although I don't understand why one of his eyes is like puffed over and he has like pale skin. You know, he almost looks like Sloth from the Goonies to me. So I wasn't too big a fan of how they handled Denenther. But another big thing that the movie did that I'm also not a fan of is when we switch back to Frodo and Sam. Gollum is actually able to get Frodo into his confidence, basically saying, I own the ring once as well. No, wait, let me see if I can try to do the Gollum impression.
I own the ring as well. It's a heavy burden for you. Yes, master, yes. But you must keep it, otherwise the fat one will take it away.
I can't do a good Gollum, I am sorry. And so, instead of Gollum sneaking off to pay homage to Shelob like in the book, Gollum's plan is to basically separate Frodo from Sam, as he realizes that Frodo would be a lot weaker without Sam in the way. And Gollum actually succeeds. But how this is done really confuses me. So Gollum convinces Frodo that Sam ate what was left of all the way bread for their rations. To which Sam knows that this is not true, but yet he kind of thinks it is. And as he is going back to the Shire because Frodo yelled at him to do so, he finds the wrappers of what's left of the lumbus, and then he realizes that he didn't eat it all. Why didn't you just keep it like how it was in the book, you know? Just keep them all together. And then that is where the big difference is. So at this point, it's just Gollum and Frodo going off to Shelob's lair. It plays out very similarly in the book as well as the movie. But the main thing is, because Sam was with Frodo the whole time, Sam is able to kind of give a little commentary, like the idea that Shelob's lair seems even darker than when they had to go into the mines of Moria. And it seems like something is lurking around the corner. To which Sam almost sees a cluster of malicious eyes. Sam has the file of Galadriel and is able to blind Shelob long enough for them to get out. However, there is a spiderweb blocking the way, and they have to hack and slash at it like crazy. When Sam's sword just isn't doing it, Frodo tells him to step aside, and Sting is what's able to do it. Now it's sort of similar here, as Frodo has the file of Galadriel, which was only just mentioned until now. In fact, there had to be a little narration from Galadriel herself saying, oh yeah, remember I gave you this. You should probably use it. To which he does, in order to blind the spider a fair bit. And Frodo is able to try to escape to the very end of the tunnel. However, he finds it's all full of spider webs, and so he just starts hacking and slashing away with Sting. After Frodo briefly gets away from Shelob, he then has it out with Gollum, who realizes that Sam really was his best friend while Gollum was manipulating him. After this, Gollum goes away. When all of a sudden Shelob sneaks behind him and injects him with his poison right in the neck. It's at this point Sam comes back, picking up the file to be able to stun Shelob. And just like in the book, Shelob intends to sit on him and then kill him with a crushing blow. However, Sam is able to grab onto Sting and hold it straight up. As such, as the body comes down, the sword pierces right into Shelob, and this is enough for her to relent. Shelob weakened, then goes back into the cave. Now, this is where there is a little bit of a continuity error. So, when Sam realizes that Frodo is what he appears to be dead because of the poison and all wrapped up, Sam takes the ring from him and puts it in his pocket and then tries to make his way to Mount Doom himself. However, in order to do so, he needs to sneak back by a group of guards, to which he needs to be invisible. Putting on the ring not only changes the landscape of the area, but also has given him super hearing, as well as the ability to understand what the orcs are saying. In the book, the orcs are speaking their horrible language. Well, here in the movie, they're just speaking what's known as the common language, English. Through both, Sam realizes that Frodo isn't actually dead and goes off to find him. Now, in the book, he chases after them invisible and finds that even the ring gives him the ability to see through dark places as the orcs go through Sheleb's lair to take him prisoner. And then the book ends with Sam just having the door locked in his face and then him having to make his way there. In the movie, Sam basically follows closely behind. In both, the orcs go crazy trying to divide the spoils among themselves. This creates quite a bit of quarrel that ends up killing most of the orcs, so by the time Sam is able to find a way to sneak into their fortress, the whole place is pretty much riddled with bodies, except for one or two orcs still arguing. Through a little bit of deduction, Sam realizes that Frodo has been locked in the highest tower. How he gets there, he's not entirely sure. Being left with despair, he decides to sing a song, to which one of the orcs that's still alive thinks that Frodo is the one singing it. So the orc sets up a ladder right behind a trapdoor in the ceiling and goes there to mercilessly whip Frodo for being so happy in this time. However, this is exactly what Sam needed. He kills the orc by shoving him down the ladder, breaking his neck, and then he's able to free Frodo. Interesting thing is, I like how they kept this detail that one of the orcs fell down the ladder. However, he didn't break his neck that time, but I do like that little attention to detail. Now, because we don't really notice that Sam has the ring, there's none of this invisibility or clairvoyance or anything, which I find kind of does a bit of a disservice for this scene. And what I find rather funny is I feel like this is almost a parody of the typical, handsome prince going to save the princess. Except this time it's Sam just trying to save his best friend. After a little bit they talk, to which Frodo is just distraught because the orcs must have taken the ring. To which Sam says, they couldn't have taken the ring, for I have it on me. To which Frodo kind of harnesses his inner golem, starting to be possessed by the ring, saying, "Give it to me, my precious." Sam then gives him the ring. However, the main thing is, when they took Frodo's possessions, they took all his possessions. So in this scene, Frodo is completely naked. Obviously, it's a bit censored for the movie. So Sam basically goes around all the corpses and tries to see if they can find some sort of uniform that can fit people of their stature, to which they do. And from there, they try their best to just sneak through the ranks of Mordor. Pretty much plays out the same in the movie. But what is different? So in the book, as they're walking along, a lot of people think that they're part of this other brigade, when one of the captains basically says,
"Hey, you there. You are not going to be breaking rank that easily. Get back in line, you maggots."
To which they follow along for a little bit until they bump into this other group of orcs, and in the confusion, both of them make their way to Mount Doom. However, the armor is just getting way too heavy for Frodo, as the ring just seems to gain pound by pound as he gets closer to Mount Doom. In the movie, they almost have to kind of sneak around the orc camp, when all of a sudden they start to disappear, and Sauron's eye starts to divert his attention elsewhere. in both the movie and the book, they've basically given up hope that they will ever return to the Shire alive again. While this seems like despair, it's actually hope. As both of them, as in both versions, they feel like they don't have to reserve some energy for the way back. So they push it as far as they can to get to that crack of Mount Doom, drop the ring in, and finally save Middle-earth from the scourge of Sauron. And what I like about the movie is that they really remind you that, oh yeah, they're on an active volcano. Which definitely explains why their water supply basically runs out and they're just constantly chugging it, but yet nothing seems to work. It gets to a point where Frodo collapses, to which Sam says, I can't take the ring, but I can carry you with it. To which Sam is able to carry Frodo all the way up to the crack of Mount Doom. Now, before we continue, we have to go back to the epic battle that is going on in Gondor at this very moment. Just when all hope seems lost, the forces of Minas Tirith come in. Now, we were talking about King Theoden and the idea that he was bringing up this army to be able to support Gondor. While there, Theoden releases Merry from his servitude. However, Merry protests. He wants to be able to serve his king on the field of battle, but the king is not having it. To which this mysterious horseman comes up and says, you will ride with me. To which Merry says, who are you? Well, you don't know who I am? You could just call me Dernhelm. From there, Merry, Dernhelm, Theoden, as well as all the forces that they can muster, make one last stretch to Gondor, to which they're able to quell this force that is pounding upon the walls of Gondor. It seems like all is going well, when all of a sudden the king of the Nazgul come by. Nobody has ever defeated him. However, on the field of battle, this mysterious Dernhelm seems to be doing a pretty good job with it. He is able to decapitate the Nazgul and then tries his best to attack the Lord. To which the Lord just bows his head back and laughs, saying, no man can defeat me. To which the mysterious Dernhelm takes off his helmet, long golden locks flow into the breeze, to which she says, I am no man. To which she immediately stabs him in the face. However, in doing so, her arm basically becomes corrupted and she is no longer able to move it. That is when Merry steps in and is able to deliver the final blow right on the creature's back. To which a very similar fate happens to him as well. But this was enough to end the King of the Nazgul, and thus Sauron starts to question the strength of man that are still around. Now, what rather annoyed me in the movie is that they completely removed the subtlety that Dernhelm was actually Arwen, Theoden's daughter. Basically, she just picks up Merry and says, I will protect you. To which Merry's just like, oh, hey, it's you. I just like the subtlety there. The idea that it's like, ooh, no man can defeat it. Oh no, it's gonna get real here. Instead, as soon as the guy says the line, it's just kind of like, yeah, come on, say it. Let's get on with this. Now, what I find rather interesting is, in the movie, both Merry as well as Arwen seem perfectly fine after taking out one of the great lords of darkness. While in the book, both of them are slowly being consumed by this darkness, just like Faramir, to which they are both sent to a place in the city known as the House of Healing. The battle still rages on, but just then, Aragorn comes in from the south with a fleet of more soldiers. The spirits that helped him take over this fleet are no longer with him, as he released them from their bondage. In the movie, the spirits actually help them take out what the remaining forces are on Gondor. So that is kind of an odd interpretation right there. But then again, the whole him getting the army of the dead is also very different as well. The battle is won, but only very temporarily. Aragon comes into the city to try to figure out what is left of this place. He goes to the House of Healing to find Mary, Faramir, as well as Theoden's daughter. All of them slowly being consumed by this darkness. To which Aragon tells the people at the House of Healing that they need this particular spice. Unfortunately, this is something nobody has, as most people considered it something absolutely worthless. However, Aragon is able to find it, and this spice is able to bring all of them back to life again. This is in fulfillment of an old legend that when the king returns, the king's hands are the hands of healing. To which everybody proclaims Aragon as the new king. However, before he can take his place on the throne, he puts Faramir in his place. As Aragon, Gandalf, Legolas, Gimli, and a handful of Gondor soldiers have one more plan. In order to give Frodo a little more time, as well as divert the attention of Sauron, they're going to go for an all-on attack onto Mordor. Once again, pretty similar to how it's presented in the movie. Now what's interesting is when they get to the gate, so in the extended cut, as well as in the book, there is this one mysterious soldier who has been in the aid of Sauron for so long that even he doesn't know his own name. Like seriously, that's how it's written in the book. He holds up Frodo's mithril coat as well as some of his other possessions. This is a way to demoralize some of the troops. The demands are that Sauron is to be able to get Gondor as well as several other human settlements without any resistance. They must all surrender their weapons and pledge allegiance to Sauron. To which Gandalf says that he agrees to these terms, much to the shock of everyone. But just then, while he's on Shadowfax, he runs up to this mysterious mouthpiece of Sauron, steals all the goods, and says, "Yes, we will take these goods, but we shall do battle." To which from there they realize that they have slowly been surrounded by orcs. Pippin, realizing that Merry kind of had the upper hand in taking out the Lord of the Nazgul, wanted to be able to have some glory, but not like this. This battle has at least 10 orcs to 1 human. The battle is ferocious, and just as Pippin is about to fade, off in the distance he hears somebody calling, "The eagles are here! The eagles are here!" before he fades to black. Now we jump back to Frodo and Sam. Frodo practically being exhausted, while Sam still having enough strength to be able to carry Frodo up to the crack of Mount Doom. Now this is just a rather pedantic detail, but in the book it's described Sam as carrying Frodo piggyback style. So his feet are under his armpits and his hands are around Sam's neck. In the movie, Sam is giving Frodo what's known as the fireman's carry. So you got like the feet off to the side and you got the arms kind of clasping around over here. It's just a minor thing, but I can't stand it. But just as they are about to get to the crack of Mount Doom, Gollum comes by, saying how annoyed he is by the craftiness of these hobbits, and then attempts to attack them. Sam drops Frodo right on top of Gollum, stunning him for a while, to which Sam then picks up his sword and starts swinging ferociously at Gollum. To which Sam says, "Run, Frodo, run to the crack!" Plays out pretty similar to how it does in the movie. However, Sam doesn't say run for it. Frodo just kind of learns to do it by instinct. Now, Gollum is subdued long enough for Sam to be able to follow Frodo into the crack. In the book, Frodo is just standing there saying, "I've come all this way to destroy the ring. but I don't want to. I want to save it for myself. To which he then puts on the ring and becomes invisible. Now, maybe it's just me or I misread it, but in the movie, he puts it on his pointer finger, but instead I thought he put it on his ring finger instead. But going invisible doesn't really do a whole lot of good for him, as Golem still wants his precious. He is able to straddle Frodo and tries his best to be able to get the ring off of him. In both versions, Golem is able to get the ring, but he rips it off of Frodo's finger, so there's only about this much of it left afterwards. Golem is very excited by this, but doesn't notice that he's on the ledge, and both Golem and the ring tumble into the crack of Mount Doom. Sam and Frodo then run outside before the volcano slowly erupts and envelops them in lava. They are on this one rock, awaiting death, but both take pleasure in the idea that they finally ended the evil domain of Sauron. Pretty similar to how it happens in the movie, however there's a bit of drama as both Frodo and Golem go over the edge. Frodo is there trying to hold on as well as he can, however, having one less finger, he can't really grip that well anymore. But Sam is able to reach down and grab him, and they run out to the mountain. It's at this point the eagles that are still around swoop down and pick up Sam and Frodo and return them back to Rivendell, where everything seems to be perfectly alright for now. Frodo spends several days in Rivendell just trying to figure out what everybody's story is. Now the movie cuts out a lot. Basically, after Frodo is back to health, he goes back to the Shire, enjoys it for a little bit, and the anniversary happens of when he was stabbed by one of the wraiths. It still hurts him like crazy, but the next day he seems perfectly fine. However, Frodo is being a little mysterious and gives Sam the book that he and Bilbo have been working on for a very long time. He says that this is the end of his story and that Sam's must begin. Now, after the One Ring was destroyed, the Third Era ends and the Fourth Era begins. Unfortunately, with this passage of time, several people have to go. Frodo, Gandalf, Elrod, and the majority of the elves. They all ride off into the Grey Havens. When Sam returns with Merry and Pippin back to the Shire, to which Sam, now having the lovely wife of Rose, says to his two children, "Well, I'm back." And that's where the movie ends. Now, a lot of people complain about the idea that there's like so many different endings in the movie, but somehow it's worse and better in the book. So in the book, after everybody realizes what each story is, the group travel back to their homes. Aragorn taking his rightful place as king of Gondor, as well as replanting the king's tree back in the circle of powerful city. Legolas and Gimli go off to their locations. Gimli promised Legolas to show him the mines of Helm's Deep, and Legolas promised to show Gimli the forest. I forget the name of it, but it's the one that Merry and Pippin escape to after they get free from the orcs. From there, it's just Gandalf and the four hobbits, and they all go back to Bree to see what has happened to the old town. Now, what's rather fun is the idea that Bill the Pony, yes, the one that was left behind in the Fellowship of the Ring, actually made his way back to the Prancing Pony, and is thus being watched by the innkeeper, as well as who's left for staff at that point. The town is still rather nervous about that attack they had from the ring wraiths, and have always been a little on edge since. However, once the innkeeper hears the news that the king is back on the throne, he is confident that the Prancing Pony will be restored back to its former glory, just like it was when the hobbits came by. The hobbits make their way back to the Shire, when Gandalf mysteriously says, "My time is up." However, I must tell you that things are different in the Shire now. However, what you have faced will be nothing compared to what you will see there. To which all the hobbits just kind of stare at him and say, what's going on? To which Gandalf goes away. As the hobbits get a little closer to the Shire, they realize that something is wrong as there are gates up, as well as all these rules and regulations that the hobbits not only have, but are enforcing. Merry, Pippin, Sam, and Frodo just aren't having any of this. They jump the gate and say, "We must sleep in your house." What? That's against the rules? That's what I have to say about your rules. It's starting to come to a head when all of a sudden the person that sold Bill the Pony to Sam for about like 4 times the cost comes out and says, "So, what is the trouble here?" But seeing that all of them are armed and ready to kill him, he runs away like a coward. However, there were spies sent out in the middle of the night. Where they were, nobody knows. But as they slowly make their way into the Shire, they are captured by this group of sheriffs, as they're called. And they say that they must go back to Frodo's hometown. They kind of make fun of this because the group is in very good shape. They're able to run miles ahead of the poor sheriffs just trying to keep up with them. However, the sheriffs are saying, "You're under arrest and you gotta go back to this area." And it's just like, "Oh, come on, slowpokes, you're supposed to keep us captive, right?" However, their troubles are not over. From talking to all the hobbits around, they find that there are a lot of ruffians that have moved into the place, all headed by a mysterious character known as Sharky, the biggest and baddest of them all. There was a bit of a run-in with a few of his minions, to which some of the hobbits in town come together and they are able to take down some of these ruffians. Some of them go off running, while the rest either surrender or are shot dead. Frodo is rather disturbed by this, because no hobbit has ever died in the Shire before. However, things are different since the ruffians have moved in. Frodo is kind of a pacifist here, but knows that killing must be possible in order to restore the balance. They go on right to Frodo's ancestral home, where they hope to find Sharky, but instead all they just find are piles of garbage as well as this biggest rank smell that they could think about. Just then, the mysterious Sharky comes by to find out that it is actually Saruman, still being followed around by Wormtongue. Some of the hobbits that have come together to overthrow Sharky are quite scared by this, but Frodo says, "Do not listen to him. The only power that he has is the power of his voice, and since there's so many people around, it's not going to work." The hobbits start to believe this, and then start to go after Sharky. To which Sharky to go, when Frodo says, "Wormtongue, you don't have to leave, you haven't done any evil." To which Saruman says, "Oh, he hasn't done any evil to you. Well, he killed the original chief to help me take his place." To which Wormtongue has just had enough of his attitude. When Sharky's back is turned, he pulls out a dagger and just brutally stabs Saruman until there is nothing left of him. This is what I found interesting in this section of the book. It seemed like, yeah, it's probably just going to be like another 3 chapters of everybody saying goodbye. And then all of a sudden, this very epic chapter comes out of nowhere. I will say I was kind of disappointed that this wasn't in the movie because I wanted to see Sir Christopher Lee actually do this. But at the same time, I knew it wasn't going to be a thing. That and, well, this is the longest movie of them all. And you also have to cover a few events that you missed in the Two Towers as well. Now, the ending plays out about the same way as it does in the book. However, Sam follows them into the Grey Havens, to which the boats are prepared, and it seems like there's a bit of a ceremony that has been expected for a very long time. But right before they go, Merry and Pippin come riding up on their horses as fast as they possibly can, to which they say, "You have tried to give us the slip twice this time, and you have nearly succeeded this time, but we were able to make it. But this time it wasn't Sam that told us, it was Gandalf." To which Gandalf turns to Frodo and says, "Yes, I told them. I figured it'd be a lot less lonely of a ride for you, Sam, if you had 3 rather than yourself." The boat goes away, to which Sam just stares off into the distance until he can no longer see anything anymore. Then the group slowly head back to the Shire, to which Sam says his immortal line to his wife Rose. "Well, I'm back." And so that is the Return of the King. In making this little review, I can see why it was really difficult to be able to try to make this into a movie. There was a lot of events to describe here, some of which weren't even in the movie. And then the movie decided to kind of make other things that it wanted to focus upon. And like I said, one of the other problems is they had to tie up the loose ends of the 2 towers as well. So all in all, it's kind of amazing that they were able to tell as much as they were. But yeah, just like the other 3, I prefer the book so much better. There's just a bit more time to be able to develop, and it could be me, but I just found the ending of the movie to just kind of be like, "Oh, come on, what else is left?" I mean, it felt that way in the book, but then all of a sudden there's that chapter about everybody retaking the Shire again, and I'm like, awesome! So yes, that is the Return of the King. I hope you will join me next time, where I will finally be going over Peter Pan. Now, as you can see, this is a lot shorter than The Lord of the Rings, so it might not be too long of a wait. But I'll tell you right now, I am so tempted to start off with The Last Unicorn instead. But I promised that I was going to read Peter Pan, and I'm going to read Peter Pan. But after that, The Last Unicorn. Until next time, keep having fun.